Hello again, everybody. Today, we're going to have the second to last lesson on our courses for preparation for the exam that you'll be taking. Now, today, we're going to be analyzing the reading section of the exam. And we'll be discussing some strategies to help you complete this exam as best you can. Now, you should note that also this section and today's lesson will not only help you prepare for the exam you're going to take, but also for exams like the TOEFL and the IELTS, which are exams which prove your English proficiency, as well as exams such as the ACT, the SAT, and the GRE, which are exams which allow you to enter American or British universities if that's what you want. So, let's get started. The reading portion of the exam will have you performing 3 different kinds of tasks. The first task, which you may be required to do, is a matching task. The second, we call multiple choice. And the third is a gap fill, or fill in the blank, as it is sometimes called. So let's start by examining the matching activity in a little bit more detail. In the matching activity, you will be given paragraphs of text, and you will have to match these paragraphs of text with the corresponding headlines. Now, in multiple choice, you will be given a set of possible answers to a question. And multiple choice presupposes or assumes that the answer to the question that you are asked will be included amongst these answers. And finally, in a gap fill or fill in the blank, you will be given a set of possible solutions and a text with certain words removed. These certain solutions or these possible solutions will need to be inserted or filled in to the blanks inside the text. Now, let's talk about some strategies that we can use during the matching section of the exam. The first thing you're going to want to do, the very first thing you're going to want to do, is read the task attentively. Be very, very careful here. Read all the instructions, all of them, even if you think you don't need to, and make sure that you understand them before you move on to the next section. This is the most important step. Many very, very, very intelligent, very, very clever students often miss questions simply because they don't read the instructions. Now, the second thing you're going to want to do is read the answers first. Now, the answers here are going to give you an idea of what to look for. They're going to tell you what information you need to know, or what information you may need to consider during the exercise. So here, reading the answers first makes you do a little bit less work during the actual reading. Now, the third thing that you're going to want to do is read the paragraphs, looking for key words and phrases, and define the topic of each paragraph. Knowing the topic of each paragraph, knowing what each paragraph discusses, is going to give you the information you need to match it to the appropriate headline. And finally, step 4, correlate the key words that you've underlined and the main topics of each paragraph with the appropriate headlines. Now, this is the order you're going to want to approach this activity in, because basically it's the fastest and the simplest way to do it. It reduces the amount of work that you, as the test taker, have to do. And that's for the best, generally. So now, let's complete this exam task together, following these steps. So, what did I say to do first? Well, if you remember, I said that we should read the task carefully. So, here's our task. Read the text below. Match choices A through H to questions 1 through 5. And there are 3 choices you don't need to use. Now, pay attention here. In the question, they have explicitly stated that we do not need to use 3 of the options. We have 3 extra choices just to mess with us. Now, let's move on to the second point and read our option. Now, in the picture, you should see the possible choices you have for headlines. We have first the perfect mix of old and new, then festivals, dining facilities, visit Shakespeare's museum, buy before you fly, shopping, attractions, and culture and history. Now that's the second task out of the way. Let's move on to the third. Now, our next step is to look through the text and identify and underline key words and phrases. This will make it easier for us to find them later when we're considering how to answer our questions. And we should also define the topic of each paragraph. So, let's look through the text now. Having read the text, we can circle and identify the following key words: tourist attractions, combinations of old and new. So, A and G both seem appropriate for this paragraph. Now, we have two options, so let's leave those alone and consider the next paragraphs. Now, let's look at the next one. Stratford-upon-Avon has many historical sites which are really worth a visit. Enjoy Shakespeare's birthplace for a fascinating look into his life and times, and visit one of the Holy Trinity to see his graves. See his great work performed at the Courtyard Theatre, which is the Royal Shakespeare Company's main performance area. Now here we also have other phrases we can underline. Look at historical sites and Shakespeare's company. Now from these we can get that H is probably the best headline for this. So let's move on to paragraph 3. In paragraph 3, we have a lot of key words to see here. First, there's a lot to see. Next, sightseeing or sightseeing buses. And finally, walking tours. Now, all of these kind of have the same theme, right? So G here is the most attractive option to us, attractions, because it most closely fits the task which we were given at the beginning of the exercise. Now, paragraph 4 has many more keywords, and that should make it much easier for us. We have words like afternoon tea, lunch, cuisine, fruit, vegetables, cheeses, farm products, dishes, cafes. And from this, we can get that C will be our best option, because all of these keywords generally are talking about dining facilities. We're talking about food, cafes. Now, moving on to our 5th paragraph, we have a few more key words that we can look for. Here, the key words you should identify are queues, tickets online, and don't waste time. So from these, we can conclude that the option E, buy before you fly, is the best option here, because we're talking about queues and lines and waiting and tickets. And it's giving me advice. It's saying, literally, buy your travel, right? That's another hint that we can use. So here, buy before you fly is very logical. Now, a final step to complete this task is that I would recommend for you to check whether or not you have written all of your answers correctly. Just double check, make sure you've written the answer down properly, because it would really be a shame to do all of that work getting the correct answer and then get the question wrong because of a silly mistake. Now, let's move on to looking at strategies by which we can perform the multiple choice section of the exam. Now, the methodology for doing multiple choice questions is a little bit more complicated, but it's still very quick and very easy once you get used to it. So, the first thing, again, that you need to do, and this is the first thing that you always need to do, is read the task carefully. Please read the task, read the instructions, and make sure you understand the instructions. Now, the second thing we're going to want to do here is skim the text. After we skim the text, we want to read the questions then, and underline any key words in the questions, what we think we're looking for. Then we will scan the text for these key words, and finally, we'll correlate the options for answering with the underlined key words and the main idea of the sentences and their parts. So, let's look at a little bit more detail about how we should do this. First, again, we're going to read the task together and never skip this part. Read the text below. for questions 1 through 5, choose the correct answer. Pretty simple. This time they didn't give us any crazy information. But we still need to read it just in case. Next, let's skim the text. So, you may ask me, what do I mean when I say skim the text? Well, the first thing you should remember is that during any reading exam, any standardized reading exam, it doesn't really matter which one, they will intentionally give you more text than you can possibly read in the time they've given to you. They give you too much so that if you try to read every word, you will never finish. So we need strategies to make ourselves read faster. We need to be quicker. We need to be more efficient if we want to comfortably finish the exam. So skimming is one of the strategies that we can use to read faster. Now here, you will not read the text word for word, but instead you will read the topic sentence of each paragraph, looking for the main ideas of the essay as a whole. What you're looking for here is the main idea of each paragraph. That way, later, when you come back and you're searching for the information that the questions are asking you about, you don't have to read the whole essay or article again just to find it. You know where it is already. And during these, we want to look for things like topic sentences, important information like names, dates, events, and always, always, always read the conclusion in detail. So let's skim a text together just to give you an idea of how this should go. Now, in front of you, you see a lot of text, really a frightening amount of text, but we're not going to worry about all of it. I'm just going to talk about the topic sentences of each paragraph. So first, Astoria, Oregon is one of the Northwest's great visitor destinations in terms of the quality and variety of activities and attractions. Here, I know what the paragraph's about, so I don't need to keep reading. Next, we live in a technologically advanced and interconnected world. Places that were almost impossible to reach are now accessible by road systems, waterways, and airplane rides. Here, again, I know what this paragraph is about now. I don't need to continue. Next, to determine whether a location qualifies as remote, you should consider how difficult it is to reach this spot and the distance from the nearest inhabited location. Again, I understand what we're talking about. I can stop reading my paragraph here. Now, since we've skimmed our paragraph, or since we've skimmed our article, let's move on now and look at our third task, which is reading the questions and underlining all of the key words. So let's look at our first question. The most remote inhabited location on Earth is. Now here, you may want to think of some synonyms for any words that they ask you or any keywords that they ask you. Here, the keywords are most remote and inhabited. However, these words may not appear exactly the same way in the text. And that's why it's a good idea to think of these synonyms. So we could think of words like isolated and far away instead of remote. Or words like, instead of inhabited, words or phrases like places where people live, or other phrases that just mean inhabited. Or even in the second question, what should be taken into consideration to determine a location as remote? Here, the key phrase is location as remote. That's what we need to determine. That's what we need to know. Now, since we've determined what we're looking for, we need to go back to the text and look for it, or scan for it. And to scan is to read in a very specific way. It's to read looking only for key words or key information. For example, if you're looking for information about cats, you only look for the word cat. You're not reading it again. You're just trying to find the word cat. And here, we're looking for words about remoteness and words about inhabitedness of certain locations. So, let's look through our text again. Now, having scanned the text, we can draw the conclusion that two places are typically considered the most remote inhabited locations on Earth: Antarctica and Tristan da Cunha. However, in our answer variance, we don't have Antarctica. So this means that the answer must be Tristan da Cunha. That's it. we scanned for our information, we found it, and we know that this must be true. Now, let's scan the information for the second question. Now, in one of our paragraphs, we have stated explicitly to determine whether a location qualifies as remote. We have determine, location, and remote all in one sentence. That probably means we're in the right place. And they follow it by saying, you should consider how difficult it is to reach the spot and the distance from the nearest inhabited location. We're given two rules exactly. So the answer here, when we look back at our options, is clearly number 4. Now the last type of reading task is going to be a gap fill or a fill-in-the-blank activity. And let's look at the strategies for how we approach this task. First, again, read the task carefully. You can't get around this. You can't ignore it. You must read the task because, especially for this kind of activity, very important information may be included. Now, next, you're going to want to read all of the answer choices, not just the questions. Read the answers first. And then, third, read the text carefully and pay attention to the grammar. Now, why do I say pay attention to the grammar? Sometimes, if you're absolutely lost and you have no idea what the answer should be, you can use the grammar to determine the correct answer. For example, many test takers can be a little bit sloppy when they write the exam. And if there's a word or a phrase that follows an article, a or an, they may forget to write a/an. They may write a or an. So if they write an, you know the answer must begin with a vowel, right? So the grammar here can give you very important clues as to how to properly answer the exam. And likewise, a correct answer should never be grammatically incorrect. So let's practice. First, let's read the task. Read the text below. Choose from A through H, the one which best fits each space, 6 through 11. There are 2 choices you do not need to use. Here, again, we have extra possible answers. And that's important to keep in mind. So next, let's read all of the answer choices together. First, we have A, towards reaching his goals, different ways you can overcome, for the victories, to find a mentor or a coach, to be the best, rather than a stopping point, to see his total commitment, and to keep going even when it gets tough. Now, the text we have to complete, you should see on the screen right now. So let's work through it together. First, however, many of us did not get a chance. Now, get a chance grammatically should be followed by the infinitive. So, when we think about the content, get a chance to do something, we have 2 choices that look attractive. G, to see his total commitment, and H, to keep going even when it gets tough. And both of these could logically make sense. However, after the blank, or after the gap, we have the word and determination specifically. And this means that we should be following get a chance with to see a noun. We need a noun here. So many of us did not get a chance to see his total commitment makes much more sense and is much more grammatically correct. So here, the best answer for this gap will be G. Now, let's move on to the next gap. Determination is having the guts, blank. Now here, this is the end of a sentence. Determination is having the guts. Now, having the guts to do something, right? We follow having the guts with the infinitive, even though it's slang and even though you may not be exactly sure what it means. Here, we should follow it with the infinitive. So, we have a few phrases with infinitives, but only one of them really makes sense here. To keep going even when it gets tough. Here, we can think about determination and toughness because having determination for victories doesn't really make sense. Victories motivate you, they don't challenge you. And to find a mentor or a coach also doesn't really make much sense. And to be the best, really, H is a much better answer, to keep going even when it gets tough. And finally, the last gap, rather, he learned from those missed opportunities and continued to work even harder, blank. Now, logically, we could put work even harder with an infinitive, work even harder to do something. We can work for something, and we can work towards something. So grammatically, we have a lot of choices left, and this may not be the best way to look at it. So we should look at the content instead. And there are two choices that can really make a lot of sense here if we're looking at content. We have A, work even harder towards reaching his goals, or C, work even harder for the victories. Now here, I would tell you that the best answer is in fact A. But how did I reach that decision? Well, in this paragraph, we're talking about determination. We're talking about keeping going, working harder. And here, we haven't mentioned victories. Moreover, we haven't mentioned that Michael is working towards victories. He's working for himself. He's working on his goals. So here, it's much more logical, and it fits the paragraph much more to say, to work even harder towards his goals, or towards reaching his goals. Here, again, both A and C are technically correct, but A is the better answer, so we should choose it. Now, that's it. To summarize all of these strategies, remember, 1, always read the task first. Be attentive, don't be careless, and don't miss any details. Read every word. Now, for matching and gap-filling exercises, read answer choices before reading the text. Really, this is a good idea in general for anything. Read the answers first and read the text second. Next, do your easy questions first. Leave extra time for the hard questions, but don't start with the hard questions. If a question seems difficult, skip it, move on, and come back to it later. Now, when answering, don't forget to cross out any choices that you've already used, or for multiple choice, any answers that you know are impossible. This just makes things easier for your brain. It gives you less information to remember and lets you use more brain power for the exam. Now also, don't forget to use skimming and scanning techniques. You don't need to read every word. Even if the paragraphs are quite interesting, you don't need to read all of them, just the information that you want. Now, for keywords, whenever you're looking for keywords for scanning, be sure to think of some synonyms or some alternate phrasings for the key information you're looking for. And in certain questions, you can also use grammar rules to rule out some impossible answers. Remember, if an answer is grammatically incorrect, it's wrong. It doesn't matter how right it may seem in other ways. If the grammar is bad, the answer is wrong. And finally, spend no more than 50 minutes on this activity. Well, actually, I would recommend this. Spend no more than 40 minutes on the activity, and then spend the last 10 minutes checking your work. Spend 40 minutes doing, and then 10 minutes revising, because this will help you catch any mistakes or silly errors that you've made during the exam. Now, is 10 minutes enough time to reconsider an entire section? No, but it is enough time to see whether or not you wrote A instead of B. So 10 minutes to check always. And my own recommendation here also is to practice as much as possible, because practice makes perfect. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next lesson.